Hello YouTube, a little bonus surprise video here. We actually have an update on something with a new product coming out. Now as usual, once you get one of these updates, this product won't be coming out until some point, probably the middle or later part of next year. But regardless, it's always fun to talk about some brand new products coming out. So in this case, it's going to be 2026 Upper Deck AEW. This is the flagship release, which always has some pluses and minuses. And I'll include a link in the description to this site. GoGTS is where a lot of this comes out. This is a distributor who usually gets a lot of these solicitations, which shows a lot of the images. We'll take a look at a couple of mock-ups and everything, which is always fun to look at to get a little bit of an idea of what's coming down the pipeline, and that's what we've got here. Now, as usual, just fair warning for the folks that want to have the one autograph per box, it's not going to happen here either. I really don't think any of the flagships are ever going to do that. It's one of those things where I think it's going to be reserved for other products. We obviously have SP Game Use, which is still out there and still getting broken, and that's a product that obviously plays into that. I actually think it's been received pretty well. I do really like the cards, and I've been able to make pretty good progress on picking up some of the singles. But when it comes to flagship is always going to follow certain specific rules and kind of certain parameters. Although, this particular one, when we get into it here, there are some context clues here that I think suggest that this could at least have one good feature that I think some of you are going to enjoy. Regardless, let's take a look at it and we'll kind of walk through it here as we go into it. Obviously, months and months in advance of actually seeing it. So here it is, 2026 Upper Deck AEW delivers one autographed memorabilia or clear-cut card. The clear-cut card is one that I've already seen from some of the comments in some of the posts, social media posts. Is obviously not going to be super popular, but that is going to be on there. 4 numbered or rare ratioed cards plus 20 base set parallels and 7 insert cards in every box. Now there is something else here that we want to kind of make note of here. There is a configuration change. There is actually less cards per box. So I'll quickly go over this. You've got 16 boxes in a case, 16 packs per box, and then 6 cards per pack. Now for those keeping score at home, that means a hobby box is going to contain 96 cards. So we've got under 100 cards in a hobby box. That's why I said there's some context clues here. If you read between the lines a little bit, I think we're going to see a little bit of a difference when this one finally does happen. Regardless, we'll get back to that in a second, but let's scroll down a little bit. So you can see here from the box break, kind of the breakdown of the different kind of things that are going to be included in there. So here's your base set parallels and kind of the combination of that. I mentioned 4 numbered or rare ratio cards per box, and then 7 insert cards. So it's going to be a combination of 4 Mighty Ones, UD Portraits, Star Entrances, Tony's Timeline, and Total Access cards, 2 Canvas cards, and 1 Dazzlers card per box, which is kind of interesting. It's a little bit tougher on the Dazzlers. We're still following a 100 card base set, and then we've got 3 subsets, which is Wrestlers for cards 1 to 70, Tag Team / Trios for cards 71 to 90, and then Announcers, Refs, Trainers, Managers put it shoehorned kind of at the end from card 91 to 100, which kind of follows this flagship kind of design from the past. Now there's going to be, similar to the past, a first UD subset, and that's going to include within the flagship. So these are people who are debuting for the first time in a flagship product, even if they've been in other products. So just make that distinction there. But this checklist includes Bobby Lashley, Shelton Benjamin, Ricochet, and Mina Shirakawa. As far as parallels, you got your autographs, autograph pyros numbered to 5, gold autographs 1 of 1, matte red memorabilia, gold memorabilia numbered to 25, outburst red out of 25, and outburst gold 1 of 1s. From the Dazzlers, it looks like they simplified it a little bit. So we've got the blue set and the more rare green parallel. So it sounds to me like they've kind of streamlined it a little bit from having the different versions of it. Although I probably will expect that in the retail version, if there is a retail setup, which I would expect so, but if there is a retail one, probably there'll be another variant of that. That's where we get some of the different versions of the inserts in the retail exclusive. And then we got the return of the Ringmasters autograph set. So you've got Hangman Adam Page here, Megan Bayne, which I think will be a really popular addition to that one, Jon Moxley and Timeless Tony Storm. Tony's Timeline is literally 15 of the greatest moments of Timeless Tony Storm's career. An insert based on Tony Storm at this point, I think, is probably a good call. Adversaries autographs, and we've got one example of that in the mock-up, so I think that's probably an interesting combination there in terms of an autograph insert. So let's take a look at some of these mock-ups here just to get a bit of an idea. So here's what your base set kind of looks like. So an example there, first UD, Ricochet, and then an autograph variant there just to show off that. It is a mock-up, so at the end of the day, it will look a little different. The tag teams here example with the memorabilia numbered out of 25. So you've got an example there with Brodito, which will be kind of a cool card. And then the Mina Shirakawa example here is kind of a good looking one. Again, we'll see what picture they end up using, if it's similar to this or if it's something different. But I will say with the red outburst, I think it's going to look pretty good. I think those are going to pop pretty well on that. They did a much better job with the outburst red this past time because you want to kind of have the foil really dominate the background, and then you can still see a little bit of the foil there in the bottom section. So I think that'll probably be pretty good looking in hand once the cards are live. And here we've got 2 things, and this is where we're going to have a little bit of fun. So first, Tony's Timeline. Like I mentioned, I think with Tony Storm having a timeline kind of insert set there, I think is probably a good call. Fanimation. Now that's one, if you are familiar with some of the Upper Deck's other products, you have seen this before. It is polarizing, let's say, to say the least. I'm not the biggest fan of Fanimation, but there are other people that swear by it. Obviously, when we get a chance to actually see what the odds and everything look like, I will wager that's probably going to be a tougher insert. So we'll reserve judgment once we get a little bit more info on that. But the Fanimation, if you want to get a little bit of a heads up of what that looks like, you can look it up in hockey. Like just punch in Upper Deck Fanimation and you'll see examples of it from other products they've used in the past. As far as new inserts there's a couple of examples here. The Adversaries autographs, which we'll see a mock-up of in a second. Star entrances, which we don't have on there. Tony's timeline, which is right here. Fanimation, which we see there. And we've got Hey EW, which is actually kind of funny. I think based on the name there, I think that's based on RJ City's YouTube interview series. Which if you're familiar with the AEW YouTube page is actually something they've been doing for quite a while. What's funny about it is actually they just had recently episode, I think 165, which is actually the last episode. So the show itself has been canceled by RJ City himself. He actually did an interview. I was listening to a podcast episode where he was talking about it and he had kind of run through the entire roster and gone through everybody and he just didn't want to go back around. So they had done a lot of the stuff they wanted to do with it. So actually at episode 165, they ended it. So I guess this will be an insert based on that, which would be kind of interesting. I'll see kind of what happens with that. They did have a who's who with a lot of the roster at the time. So we'll basically see what that ends up looking like. But it is kind of funny that it's announced as a new insert, which I think is based on that theme, when the YouTube show itself has actually been canceled. If you're curious, I'll leave a link in the description to the YouTube channel, specifically the video that was the last episode, and you can check it out for yourself. The other one, Mighty Ones, I'm not too familiar with what that's going to look like. It doesn't sound familiar to me, so we'll have to see what that looks like. And then here, looking at some of it, this is the Green Dazzlers, which they mentioned was going to be the tougher one. Then you've got the Megan Bayne example here, the mock-up of what the Ringmasters is going to look like. I don't mind it. The black and white thing is hit or miss. It depends. Hopefully they use a better picture than this example, but conceptually it should be fine. And I think the Ringmasters is generally pretty tough in terms of ratio that you're going to get on that, so it's not going to be a common card to pull, and I think they'll be very attractive. As far as the rest of these, it follows a lot of the stuff that we've seen in the past. UD Canvas, Total Access, Dazzlers, Day with the Belt, again, Ringmasters autographs, and UD Portraits, so you've got that on there. And then, as I said, the Dazzlers seems like it's going to be a little tougher this time around because you're only getting one per box. And then the Dazzlers Green is a variant to it. So that's probably going to be tougher than that. Then on average, you're getting 2 UD Canvas or a Canvas SP card per box. So it looks like the Canvas is going to be a little bit tougher compared to previous years. Overall, here is just kind of repeating what we talked about previously, but then you're seeing an example of the Adversaries autographs, which thematically, if you've been following kind of AEW storylines the last couple of months, or the last year or so, this is actually a pretty good combo with Moxley and Darby Allin. I think that'd be kind of a fun chase for folks that were following that whole storyline with the Death Riders, Darby Allin, etc. So not a bad choice. I think if you got the right combination of characters there, I think you could do well with that. So from here, let's quickly talk about this. I was talking about a little bit earlier about context clues. We don't know what the final, MSRP or what the initial pre-sale is going to be on this stuff, as it's still way too early for that. But just based on this, there are less cards per box. But just considering the configuration change, previously in 2025, if you go and take a look back at it, it was 12 cards per pack, 12 packs per box. So now you've got more packs, but you've got less cards per pack. The end result is you go from 144 cards in a box to having 96. That's a big difference. And if you're noticing also, a lot of the inserts, even some of the more common inserts, the ones in the past, there's less versions of Dazzlers, at least from the hobby version of it. The UD Canvas is slightly tougher. A lot of these other ones have been slightly adjusted to mean that you're still getting inserts basically in every pack, but there's simply less of them. It's one of those things where there's a different variety of them and a couple got mixed in and other ones got retained, but regardless, you're getting less cards in a box. Where that kind of leads me is that looking at it just on the surface, it would not shock me if the base price, kind of the pre-sale price, ends up being lower than the last several years. Because this configuration kind of says to me, just looking at from the past in terms of this type of product and Upper Deck in the past when they're doing this kind of a changeover, it feels like it's going to be a lower MSRP. Now, how that translates into pre-sales, as far as how distributors do and all that, that's your guess is as good as mine on that. But it just seems to indicate to me a product that's probably going to be targeting a lower price point, which is not a bad thing necessarily. Obviously, the same complaint is going to be everybody wants to have the one autograph per box, which I get. But if the price point's a little bit lower, and a little bit more reasonable, I don't think that hurts. I think it kind of at least provides an opportunity for people if they want to open some boxes to be a little bit cheaper and have a chance to do that. They'll still be able to complete their sets and maybe chase after some of the inserts. So it's one of those things I've talked about in the past on this channel. I'm not the biggest fan of Flagship. It's never going to be my favorite. It's not bad, and I'll always open a couple of boxes of it. And if you're going to make it a little bit cheaper for me to do that and still get a chance to pull a couple of inserts and things that I might have some interest in and chase after the singles just like I usually do, then that's going to be fine. So regardless, when the time comes, months and months from now, I'll probably open up a couple boxes. We'll take a look at it on the channel. When we get closer to it and we get the checklist and everything, we'll be able to get a better sense of it. But just looking at it on the surface, there's some potentially interesting stuff to chase. It is a flagship product, so obviously it's not going to have all the bells and whistles. That is reserved for the other products that you're going to see throughout the course of 2026. And then regardless, right at the beginning of the year, we're going to be looking at SP Signature Edition. So I think that's going to be, if you're looking for some autographs SP Signature Edition is probably around the corner sometime in January or February, my guess. And if that's the case, then you'll get your fill of autographs at that point. And then we just had SP Game Used, which had an autograph per pack right from the get-go. So you've got an opportunity. So I think just having a more affordable option here, this is kind of the role that Flagship is going to fulfill, I think, going into 2026. And then we'll see what happens going forward from that. So obviously I can see some feedback seems to have been incorporated in some of this. There's always going to be some stuff that you're going to want to see changed. Again, Fanimation is an interesting choice to include in there. The other stuff's kind of funny, but regardless, it's kind of interesting. So I'll leave a link to this if you want to check it out and get a little bit of a early heads up. It is going to be a while before we see any of this. Also, I will give credit. This is something that maybe came up as a result of some of the stuff that happened recently with hockey. I don't remember if this little disclaimer has been there every time, but at the bottom here, if you notice, it says content is subject to change without notice. Card images are solely for the purposes of design display. Which is probably wise. If you've been following the hockey card side of things, it's probably wise to really make that disclaimer known. Anyway, just fun for me to have something to talk about, at least some new news in the world of AEW cards before the end of the year. Curious if you have any thoughts on this. Obviously, it's not going to be for everybody. Just to be clear, you don't need to spend too much time saying that it doesn't interest you because you want more autographs. That's completely fine. Totally get it. But Flagship is never going to be that for you. I think that's where some of the other stuff is going to fulfill that. But it's one of those things where if you want to have kind of a cheap rip, probably, and that's kind of where I'm feeling this is going to go. If you want to have a cheaper rip to be able to get some cards and then be able to get a base card and put together some small sets, if you're interested in that. And that's probably the target audience shooting for this, with the side benefit that it also means there's still a couple of tougher cards for kind of, player collectors to chase after. With that said, that's it for this one. I'll see. I'm probably going to at least have 1 or 2 more videos before the end of the year. I kind of have an idea in my head, maybe do like a favorite pickups of 2025. So I'll kind of think back through the year and compile a list of that. There's some good stuff, so maybe we'll have some fun with that, at least before the end of the year. I do have a few cards that came in, so we'll get at least 1 pickup video before the end of the year as well. So a couple more videos coming up on the channel before the end of the year here. But otherwise, it's been a really good 2025, and we're hoping to have some more fun here in 2026. And we'll talk about some more wrestling cards as we go forward. That's it for this one. Like if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much, and we'll catch you in the next one.